I mean, very much an open book as far as my lyrics go. I go through a lot just like anyone else does. And for me, music is just the most natural thing to get everything out in lyrically and musically.
Who is the Spirit Crusher? From the classic 1998 release, The Sound of Perseverance, comes the almighty song, Spirit Crusher. The line screamed in the chorus still sends shivers down my spine. One of the first death songs I have ever heard. It will always be a favorite of mine. The riffs, the chaotic and deranged drumming, the infernal vocal delivery, and of course the lyrics and story told through them and the music. Spirit Crusher is another feather in the cap for death, being a high watermark for melodic death metal, progressive death metal, technical death metal, whatever you want to call it, and just metal in general. It is just fantastic. It comes from the depths of a place unknown to the keeper of dreams. If it could, then it would. Steal the sun and moon from the sky. Beware.
I believe this is hell, and there aren't demons flying around with horns. People are demons. People are evil. We create evil as people on earth. This is hell, and we have heaven, we have happiness, and we have the hell that people create.
At first glance, the lyrics to Spirit Crusher seem to be about a person, someone who drags people down, whose negative energy spreads like wildfire from them. However, I think this explanation of the song is far too simplistic. To me, in this song, Chuck Schuldiner personified depression, anxiety, fear, trepidation, mental illness, and many other things into the amorphic monster known as the Spirit Crusher. A monster who was always lying in waiting, ready to ambush the unsuspecting or ill-prepared. The song begins with a bass line that sounds like something is slinking around underneath, perhaps in the depths below. It sounds like it's crawling, it's deformed, it's ugly, it's an ugly, ugly bass line. The bass and drums together create a sense of anxiety. The musical footing is not found, the drum pattern is irregular, conjuring images of the Spirit Crusher lurking, waiting for its next victim. Its evil intent is clear from the very first seconds of the song. The rest of the band joins shortly, playing a very similar yet different pattern. This I will call Section 1. The lyrics from earlier which I quoted are the first lyrics of the song, a warning to those unaware of the danger that the Spirit Crusher poses. The music here accentuates this point. It's unsure, it's unsteady, musical bass is hard to define. The rhythm is a strange one, playing a 6/8 beat. The chords here are very interesting. Going from a F sharp 5 add 9 to a G5 add 9. Each note in the chord is moved up or down one semitone. This movement, combined with no chord qualities such as major or minor thirds or sevenths, make the music itself here feel anxious. There's nothing to hold on to tell you what to feel. Is it happy? Is it sad? Is it major or minor? You can't tell. The chords here get harmonized in perfect fifths, which doesn't help for you to find your musical footing at all. The movement up and down in was semitone has been used famously to give listeners a sense of foreboding or anxiety. I'm sure you will recognize this. In this passage, we see the narrator warning others, or perhaps remembering warnings given to him earlier about the Spirit Crusher, and how, if it could, it would take everything, the sun and moon, from its victims. The narrator is anxious. Perhaps he can sense that the Spirit Crusher is near. And now here quickly, before I move on to section 2, I will discuss the structure of the song. It is structured in the typical way Chuck would structure his music. For more info on that, go check out the video I made on his writing style. But anyways, it is organized in A-B-A structure. So essentially, A is made out of several parts, then there's a bridge, which is the B section, and then the A section repeats. But now let's move on to the second section. Section 2 sees the narrator on the move. In contrast to the previous section, we have a clearly defined musical bass and key now, which is D minor. Still in the 6/8 rhythm though, it almost feels like the narrator has started to run away from the monster. But the Spirit Crusher is ever lurking. This has to be one of my favorite riffs and sections of all time. So many metalcore bands owe their whole careers to the riffs in this section. As the riffs play out, the band goes back and hammers the open D5 power chord on the open strings, indicating that the monster is not far behind them, ever present and always chasing. The change in rhythm emphasizes its gnashing teeth ready to consume. As the vocals come back again, the pace picks up, the rhythm changes to 4/4, and the music becomes more frantic. The Spirit Crusher is in pursuit, its target found and locked on. The chase begins. Chuck's lyrics here are, human at sight, monster at heart. Don't let it in, it could tear you right apart. Again, the words pass through the mind of the narrator as he's being chased down by the Spirit Crusher. He's in danger. He knows what will happen if the Spirit Crusher gets his hands on him. The monster will tear him to shreds. The frantic pace of this section and the increasing tempo really adds to the intensity and tension of this part. And as we get to the end of the section, the intensity grows until the monster finally catches up with the narrator, and the encounter with the Spirit Crusher begins. This is the third section of the song, or perhaps you could call it the chorus. As the last note of the previous section hangs in the air, a slide down the guitar neck lands a smack dab into the colossal chorus. Chock full of power chords and chunky riffs, the chorus is a powerful statement. Here we see the narrator and Spirit Crusher finally facing off, sizing each other up. The music feels like boss music from a video game, the music that would play before facing off with the endgame monster. No guilt, it feeds in plain sight. Spirit Crusher. Stay strong and hold on tight. Spirit Crusher. Chuck delivers these lyrics with a hatred and disgust so intense that it gives me goosebumps. His scream of Spirit Crusher almost acting like an attack towards the monster itself. Like how if you know the true name of a spirit or entity, it gives you control over it. Which is a story that dates back all the way to the ancient Egyptians and their stories of Isis, Ra, and Horus, and even plays a part in the Odyssey. And it plays a part in many folklore stories around the world. Perhaps you might have heard of this yourself. Now I know this is perhaps a stretch, but let us not pretend that Chuck Schuldiner, being a founding member of the death metal movement, the guy who wrote songs such as Zombie Ritual and Evil Dead, was not aware of this. He screams the name of the Spirit Crusher with such intensity and fury in order to try and submit the monster to his will. But the Spirit Crusher endures, and this continues on. As the chorus plays out, we have this chord progression. It is ascending, but always finds itself back at the open D power chord, going from the 6 to the 3 and then the 4 chord, finally ending on the 7th. The triumphant chord progression of the 6-7-1 is used quite often in heavy metal. Iron Maiden especially loves this progression. However, at the end of the chorus, instead of repeating it for the third time, it is abruptly cut off halfway through. Perhaps a mere songwriting mortal like myself would end the section like this. But it never makes it back home to the root. It hangs in the air on the 4 chord. But it never makes it home to the root in an abrupt and sudden end. And not only by interrupting the natural flow and not playing the chorus 3 times, it makes the next section even more jarring. Quite genius songwriting here by Chuck. And this is where the Spirit Crusher makes its move, beginning section 4. Here the confusion and anxiety of section 1 is ramped up to an extreme. The riffs and the bass, everything that's being played here is similar to what it was played in section 1, but is a lot more dark, a lot more unhinged, a lot more deranged. The bass is more chaotic, the rhythm more odd, the drumming even more off-kilter. The chords are even more obtuse with weirder harmonies. The Spirit Crusher is launching an all-out attack. everything it has. The sonic violence and dissonance of this section is immense. For the uninformed, this section could just sound like a disjointed mess, but placed within the story, the adventure of Spirit Crusher, it makes far more sense. But just as the Spirit Crusher makes its move, so does the narrator. The one guitar plays a riff familiar to the listener, as it is very similar to the riff in section 1, but instead of being in the key of D minor, we get this next section in the key of G minor. A full perfect fourth higher, a very common key change in a lot of Chuck's songs. The band joins in, the narrator begins his retaliation. This section feels somewhat triumphant and hopeful. Chuck cries out, "Speaking in killing words, the vicious kind that crush and kill. No mercy, its pleasure too. Taste the blood that it bled." He knows what the Spirit Crusher does. It infects the minds of its victims, filling them with vicious words that bleed people out from the inside. The Spirit Crusher is a voice inside you saying that you cannot do this or that you are not good enough. Similar to the ending of section 2, the intensity ramps up at the vocals, reaching its crescendo while Chuck screams that it loves to feast upon the wounds it inflicts. Now, before we get to the bridge, let's just take a step back from the narrative I'm presenting here. Essentially, through the lyrics and music, Chuck is telling us that mental illness, depression, anxiety, etc. are like monsters that we need to be aware of and aware of the damage they can do. The monsters come from the depths of one's mind, and as we have tragically been finding out more and more recently, it can strike in plain sight with no guilt. It can look human, everything seems okay, but deep down, the Spirit Crusher is consuming the person from within. No guilt, it feeds in plain sight. The beginning bass line of the song lets us know that this monster, this evil force, this illness is always lying in wait. This, I believe, is the genius of Spirit Crusher. To present such an intangible thing such as mental illness as a tangible monster, an evil entity, it's genius, and it adds a lot of power and depth to the song. Chuck quotes in an interview, "You use that word adventure. I like to use that word too for music. I think that music should be an adventure. For me, these songs turned into these adventures more than any other record. I think it's a very natural thing for me. When I start writing, I write and whatever comes out, comes out. I think The Sound of Perseverance is a good album to come out at this time." And, Chuck is indeed spot on. This song and a lot of the songs on The Sound of Perseverance are an adventure, are a battle. You can almost look at this as a quest to defeat the Spirit Crusher, similar to Perennial Quest, which I will be doing a video on shortly. But enough of my rambling. Let's get back to the song here. At the beginning of the bridge, we get another key change, this time to G Phrygian, another common key change Chuck likes to use in his songs. As explained in my video on Flesh and the Power It Holds, Phrygian has the flattened second degree of the scale. This key change is accompanied by a wild and crazy guitar solo. Here, without words, Chuck is describing the battle taking place, the Phrygian scale representing a darker moment and the intensity between the two adversaries. The solo begins, wild and unhinged. It reminds me of how in old cartoons, when characters would get into a fight, it would just be drawn as a ball of dust, smoke, and fists flying. This is the image that the solo conveys to me. Quite brilliant. As the solo crescendos and we move on to the next part of the bridge, we are left wondering, well, who won the battle? The ending of the solo suggests a victory for the narrator, but it doesn't suggest a full victory. It seems a little bit hollow. We get into the key change here. The key change down to D Phrygian rather than D minor, like is done in section 2 of the song, suggests that even though the battle may have been won, the war is not over. The open D power chords again make their return, aka the monster. It is still with us here. The monster may be defeated, but for how long? Can the Spirit Crusher ever truly be slain? This is what to me the guitar riff suggests. It is similar to section 2, but the Phrygian scale gives it this unsure and anxious vibe. The key change and how they relate to the lyrics and the story he's telling always amaze me. It is truly genius songwriting. Yet, just as suddenly, the anxiety comes back and we're back to the repeat of section 1. Just as anyone who has dealt with mental illness, you know that it never truly goes away, and that the spirit crusher is always lurking. Back to section 1, the cycle repeats again. We get the only change in lyrics for the song. Chuck exclaims, "When it's time to feed, to fulfill, the need to consume a breath, some will rise, standing tall, breathing out all the breath from the voice of a soul." Right away, if you are a Death fan, I'm sure you picked up on the line, "Voice of the Soul." It is the title of the famous instrumental track on The Sound of Perseverance, which I will be doing a video on in the future, so I won't really speak on the relation here. I will do that in that video. Stay tuned. But these lyrics have a distinctly more hopeful feel than the first time this section is played. Here, instead of a warning, he is proclaiming that this monster can be defeated only by someone who reaches down into the very depths of the self and breathes out the breath from their soul. In other words, only from reaching deep within yourself can you find the strength to defeat the spirit crusher. In typical Death fashion, the rest of the song is essentially a repeat of the first half before the bridge. But now, the previous lyrics juxtapose the sections that follow it in a different hopeful way. Maybe the spirit crusher can be vanquished after all. This is part of the great genius of Chuck's songwriting. The same music, the same lyrics can mean completely different things just because of what he chooses to precede it with. He did the same thing in Flesh and the Power It Holds. It's pure genius. The song ends with a pitch harmonic screaming underneath Chuck's vocals. I imagine that this is the scream of the spirit crusher as it is banished to the Shadow Realm. Or you could perhaps interpret it as the scream, the internal scream of a person dealing with all this, dealing with the anxiety, dealing with the depression. There are many ways to interpret the song. I would love to hear your interpretation down below. And that was my analysis of Spirit Crusher. A fast, heavy, and ripping song all about an all-consuming monster, one who is always lurking in the shadows ready to pounce. But yet, Chuck leaves us with a hopeful message. Through personal struggle, reaching the depths of oneself, one's shadow, perhaps the spirit crusher can be defeated. I truly feel like Chuck Schuldinger's riffs, especially on The Sound of Perseverance, are singing. They are speaking to us. It is amazing. I love this record. They are just riffs upon riffs upon riffs. Truly, this album is the sound of perseverance. Anyways, what is your take on the song? I would love to hear it. Hit that subscribe button. A lot of you guys are watching my stuff and aren't subscribed. But for everyone who is, I really, really appreciate you all. In the last 2 weeks, this has really sort of, I wouldn't say blown up or gone viral, but I've gotten a lot of traction on a lot of these videos, and I can only thank you so much from the bottom of my heart that people would love to listen to me ramble about the songs and about metal and all the stuff that I love. Anyways, thanks for watching. Cheers.